Welcome to Today's Homeowner with Danny Lipford. Expert advice on improving your home from the pages of Today's Homeowner magazine and professional remodeler Danny Lipford.
Well, I'm glad you joined us this week. You know, the roofers are out on the job and they're getting spoiled by using a conveyor belt to put all of their shingles up on the roof. You know, the shingle bundles are very heavy, and we'll take a look at some of the process that's involved in tying the new shingles in with the old. Also, we'll take a look at a strong trend in exterior remodeling using synthetic stucco to produce a good maintenance-free exterior, particularly on this house that has wood siding on the upper part of it. We'll show you about that in just a little bit. Also, we're getting a lot of response on our Simple Solutions segment, where we take a look at some of those small projects you may need to do around your house, and a little bit later around the yard, some tips on your lawn and garden. We've got a great show and a full one, so stay with us here on Today's Homeowner. You know, I just love it when there's a lot of activity out on the job. We've got brick masons that are laying bricks. We've got the roofers up on top of the roof. We've got a half a dozen framers working today. There's a lot of activity. But you know, when we started on this exterior facelift on this house, it really needed some help. It had a very bland curb appeal, actually was painted a very poor gray color, and the balcony that ran across the front of the house just really had no purpose at all. It didn't add to the house architecturally, nor could you even go out on the porch or the balcony because of it being so narrow. And we found through some of our demolition that it's actually very unsafe because of a good bit of water damage. Now, the architectural designer's done a real good job addressing some of the problems we had with the front of the house by adding or suggesting that we add this porch and foyer extension. Now, the large gable roof here will have a nice stucco finish and a large archway. It'll really look nice, and you can see how we have the front door unit installed with the circle head overhead transom that'll give some good light down into that foyer. And I might point out this is a very common thing that we do by installing some temporary doors during the construction period, because the final doors that we put here have a lot of glass in it. We want to protect them throughout the process. And later on, we'll be putting a slate ceramic on the porch. It'll give a real nice feel once you come up to this house. Now, the brick masons have done a good job on this part of the project, which is the extension of the dining room, and they've laid all of these bricks. And a little bit later, we'll be installing limestone seals or roll-locks on the bottom of these windows that again will add a nice architectural touch to the front of the house. Now, you know, when you're laying bricks, if it's not a painted brick, many times it can be real difficult to match the bricks. We're fortunate here in that it is a painted brick, and our main concern is matching the texture of the brick, the size of the brick, and making sure that our joints are raked the same way as the original bricks. This will make sure that we have a real good match once it's all completely painted. Now, the painting process on this is very important. You know, your final coat needs to be a latex paint because that works best with masonry, but the most important part of it is using a good quality masonry sealer that you apply first before you put any of those top coats on. That makes a big difference in the longevity of the paint. Actually, on a painted brick, you can get up to 10 years on a paint job. Now, being a remodeler for all these years, you learn a few little tricks, and one of the tricks that we learned a long time ago is to save any of the brick lintels or angle iron that you may have during the demolition stage. You can see that these are all some that we've saved, and you can see this particular one, how thick it actually is. So it really will support those bricks above the windows real well. But to prevent any of this rust from coming through later on when it's painted, we're having our painter come out, and he's gotten a good start on it here, applying a good metal primer to the face of this, and he'll actually put the primer all the way around so that during the process of laying the bricks, with all of the mortar being wet, it can really cause a lot of the rust to penetrate the paint. By doing it this way, you kind of block out that, and it lasts a long, long time. Now, the fellow that has the hottest job out on the project here is the roofer. Let's catch up with him. Well, the roofer's in the process of completing one of the toughest parts of a roofing job is cutting around the skylight. That's always a big potential for leaks. Now, this is one of the newer parts of the roof where we built a roof extension up over an original flat part of the roof. This is where the new shingles meets the old. Now we were lucky here as far as the tie-in because we were able to find the exact same roofer that roofed the house only 6 or 7 months ago. We were able to get the exact same brand of shingles, and of course he was able to install the new ones just as he did the old ones. So with just a little bit of time here, these shingles will match just perfectly. But now the real challenge comes in when you're tying old shingles to new shingles is in an area like this where you have a valley. Now, one of the reasons that it's a little tougher than normal shingle work is that any type of shingle will really bind together after being out in the sun for a while, and all of the tar sticks together, makes it real difficult to apply the metal that will go under this for the valley. So he'll have to be real careful in using a flat bar, a little small crowbar, to work under these shingles, pop the nails up to be able to tuck his metal under it. Then he can tie his new shingles to it and cut us a good clean valley. This again is an area that has a great potential for leaks. A lot of care has to be taken in this area of any roof. Next, our simple solution segment.
Get ready to review your fix-it list as Danny and home repair pro Alan Lyle show you this week's simple solution.
You know, many times you may have paneling in certain rooms in your house. It can be very dark. Most people like to start out with painting the walls like the homeowners have done here. The next step after you get tired of the painted wall usually is wallpaper, but it requires a little bit of wall prep before you're actually able to install the wallpaper. Now, Alan, to get rid of these grooves, you can do it a couple different ways.
That's right. You can buy some paper liner. It's made specifically for the walls like this. To be honest with you though, even though it does a fair job, it can be expensive. This way, it's a lot more fun. This is just common joint compound, and we're going to mud those grooves. What we're going to do, take about a 6-inch blade. Don't be afraid to put it very liberally on the wall. Once you have it and covering the grooves like this, come back, scrape off the excess. You see that fills that hole or that groove in very nicely.
As I mentioned, this is a painted wall, but if you have a situation where you have paneling that is not painted, you really don't want to start putting joint compound directly on that without first deglossing the wall a bit. That makes the paint and the joint compound adhere to it much better. Then come in and put a primer on it first before you start putting the joint compound. It'll make it work a whole lot better.
Now once that's on there, we're going to let that dry, and you're going to come back with some 100 grit sandpaper and knock down the rough edges. For example, if you look right down here, you can see where that blade made a little groove, and that is going to dry just like that. Your sandpaper will take that right down, make it very smooth.
Of course, after that's done, you need to size the wall. Wallpaper sizing is very important to give some good surface for the wallpaper to adhere to. Also, if you decide to change paper in a few years, it'll allow you to remove that paper very easily. This can make quite a change in a dark, dreary room if you put some bright colored wallpaper, or a lot of people are painting the walls a nice light color and then running a wallpaper border around the top of it. That'll make a difference as well. Earlier in the show, we looked at some of the brickwork that was taking place on the front of the house. Now here's some completed brickwork that makes up the perimeter of the rear porch. Now you may notice that the bricks actually are up a little bit above the actual slab, approximately a ½ inch. This allows just enough room for us to install a slate finished ceramic later in the job, and that'll allow it to stick up just a little bit so that when the water blows in here from the rain, it'll allow it to flow off real easily. Now later on, we'll be building a large gable roof with a real impressive beaded board vaulted ceiling that'll tie right into the house. I look forward to showing you that on a future show. Now this is a great outdoor recreation area that overlooks the golf course. Another great outdoor area will be the new balcony we're building up on the 2nd level, and it has a real unique waterproofing problem. Now we have a unique situation on this balcony in that down below the balcony we have an open porch as well as part of the living areas directly below us. So in case of rain blowing in, we need to ensure that no water can penetrate this surface and get to the downstairs, potentially causing some damage. Now here's what we started with before we expanded the balcony. Basically we had a 3-foot small balcony area that was not very useful at all, and then we had a 6-foot almost flat area adjacent to it that had a modified roof on it. Now in order for us to expand this, the way we did it was using some of our porch flooring. We glued those down to the modified roof. Then we nailed 2x6s on top of those, making sure that none of the nails penetrated the membrane surface. Then, before we put our flooring on, we came in with additional tar and spread it over the entire area, encasing these boards so that if any water ever did get to this area, it would not penetrate, but it would run on out into the gutter. Now, we ran these boards in the direction that we did so that if any water got down in here, the slope is running this way and it would continue on out into the gutters. After we did all of that and it dried sufficiently, we were ready to put our 5/4 wood on. Now, the 5/4 wood that we're using is a great way to go if you're doing any type of porches like this. It's a full 1 inch thick and it has the tongue and groove. You know, this is the way the old porches used to be years and years ago, and now this material is available for use today. Earlier, when they were installing the porch flooring, they used a construction adhesive and applied it in the groove of the wood so that when the boards went together, it provided a good tight seal. Later on, after everything dries and acclimates well, we'll put a good coat of oil primer on this. Then we'll come back and caulk each and every groove to make sure again that no water will penetrate it, and then 2 coats of a good porch and deck enamel. That makes it virtually impossible for any water to penetrate it. Now, one little potential problem area is here where these boards have a little stopping point here because of this roof. So we added an extra piece of galvanized flashing and wrapped it around here that in the event any water did get in here, it would continue on off the roof there. So, you know, this really works well, and if you're doing a project like this and in a situation like this, you only have one chance during construction like we have here to really ensure that there's no water getting under this area. So make sure you take your time on this part of it. Stay with us.
It's time to check out the Home Center for this week's best new product with Danny and today's Homeowner Magazine's editor-in-chief, Paul Spring.
You know, one of the chores around the house that it seems like everyone dislikes is sanding. Each year, tool manufacturers are coming out with some great specialty tools to make that task a little easier. Paul, you've got one for us today.
Sure do, Danny. This is the Bosch Compact Belt Sander, and it really combines the best qualities of a belt sander with a detail sander. What you get here is 4-inch flat spots on both sides, which gives you that aggressive belt sanding quality, but also that all-important nose there that allows you to get into crevices and corners, otherwise you'd be hand sanding.
Yeah, I noticed the flush design on the side also would allow you to get right up against a wall, such as sanding stairs or helping out on a floor.
Exactly right. That whole inline design not only gives you that capability, but it incorporates a pretty good size 3.3 amp motor, and that gives you the aggressiveness you need, but it's variable speed, so you can really determine how much you want to put into it.
Okay. Now, some of the old-fashioned belt sanders were so tough in changing out the belt. They've made this a lot easier.
They sure have. This is just one lever. It releases the tension on the belt, bring the lever back, and you're back in business again.
You know, one of the things I like about some of the new tools that are coming out, most of them come with a carrying case like this to where you can really maintain the tool over the years. Cost-wise here with the accessories and everything, what are we looking at?
About $140, Danny. Gives you this, gives you the handle for a 2-handle operation, and you're in business.
Okay, well, if sanding's on your list this weekend, this will make it a lot easier. Well, what a difference a week can make. Our framers have been able to complete all of the carpentry work on our rear balcony. They've been able to complete all the handrails, the columns, as well as the beautiful beaded board ceiling. Also, the painters have gotten a great start on applying their oil primer to the new raw wood on the exterior. Our next challenge is how to get a little more of a graceful transition between the pool coping and the rear porch. What we've decided to do to make this a lot more graceful is to establish a line, a parallel line with the back of the house on this upper level, use a large concrete saw to cut away a portion of the concrete that will enable us to pour a new concrete footing all along this area. Then we'll have our brick mason in a few days to establish a little half wall using brick, which will give us the perfect little pedestal to position our fiberglass columns that'll support this upper area. Also, the portion here that's a little lower will be completely removed with a jackhammer and a lot of hard work, which will make for a real nice landscaped area. Now, our other rear porch we showed you earlier in the show where we had the slab established has gotten a lot of progress on it as well, with the framers almost complete with that rear porch cover. You know, I love it when we have an opportunity to use beaded board on a porch ceiling instead of just smooth traditional plywood. It really makes a difference in the overall appearance. And actually, it only costs about $200 more for a ceiling of this size. Another thing, anytime we have an opportunity to vault a ceiling like we have here, really makes a difference in the spacious feeling you have here in the porch. Also, a lot of people are surprised to know that it really helps on the cooling of the porch by allowing the heat to rise up away from the occupied area. Another thing that will help keep the porch cool is the traditional ceiling fan. But you need to be careful when you're picking out a ceiling fan for an exterior area like this to select one that's made for the exterior. Many times it's actually called a porch fan. It's a lot more resistant to the conditions outside, the weather conditions, as well as a little more resistance to rust. Now, the wall that you see behind me is one of the last walls to have bricks installed on it. It'll be installed in just a day or two around all the doors and windows. Once the brick masons have completed their work, we'll be able to get the ceramic tile guys back out to install the slate finished ceramic, which will be the finishing touch here on the porch. Once it's installed, we'll be able to position the finished columns around the perimeter of the porch, a little touch-up paint, and then this is the finished part of this project. Now, around the front of the house, a new exterior surface is about to be installed. Well, they're really making a lot of progress on the installation of the cement board that's used as the foundation for the synthetic stucco system. Now, the board itself is a 1/2 inch thick, and you may notice the fiberglass mesh on each side of the board itself. That really adds a lot of strength to the board. Now, in cutting this is very simple with a circular saw and an abrasive blade. After the marks have been established, the saw moves through the board fairly easily, even though it will create a lot of dust. Now, installing it on the wall can be done directly to the studs, but it is recommended to have a good solid backing behind it, and preferably with a good vapor barrier between the board and the sheathing. Now, to fasten it to the wall itself, something very similar to a drywall screw, but these are galvanized, a little more than 1 inch long. Of course, they're galvanized because they're being used on the exterior. Now, you install these with a drywall drill, very similar to what you use on the interior of the house, and you put these about every 8 to 10 inches so that you really have a good foundation to install the synthetic stucco. Now, that process is very similar to interior drywall finishing in that you use a fiberglass tape and several other coats to create the finish. And we'll look at that in more detail on next week's show. But stay with us, we have a little bit more to show you.
Now for a bit of news from the great outdoors as Danny takes a look around the yard.
Do your yard a favor by spreading a layer of loose organic mulch, such as ground bark, shredded leaves, or straw, over the soil surface between the plants. The benefits are many. Actually, you can save water by reducing evaporation, and you can minimize your weed problem. When you do water, mulch stops mud from splashing onto the plants and possibly preventing some soil-borne diseases. If this isn't enough, mulch also makes the garden look neat and tidy. But there's one long-term benefit. If you apply mulch regularly, it actually makes the soil better and better as it decomposes. When applying the mulch, put it down in a 3 to 4 inch layer and keep it a couple of inches away from the base of any of the plants so that air will circulate freely around each of the plants. Also, use only a weed-free mulch, maybe pine straw instead of hay, for example. Otherwise, you'll be planting weeds instead of preventing them. Many people also like to use sawdust or wood chips for their mulch, but this will deplete any of the nitrogen in the soil once it starts decomposing. So use a fertilizer that's rich in nitrogen to compensate for this. Well, the stack of backer boards is getting a little smaller, but they still have over 150 sheets to install before they've completed the first stage of the synthetic stucco system. Now, over the course of this show, you've seen how we've completed all of the roofing shingles on the house, as well as the completion of the rear balcony. And I think you'll agree, the rear porch that we've built really adds a lot to the house. I hope you'll join us next week as we show you all the finishing touches and some very interesting architectural details on the exterior of this house. We'll also show you some great before video of what it looked like before this project started. Hope to see you next week here on Today's Homeowner.